everybody for coming, and I really want to thank the organizers, especially Cindy, Linda, and Brent for organizing the conference. It's great to have everyone be able to present their work. Matthew Basinger is in the Department of Sociology. He's a senior, and his emphasis areas are both criminology and social welfare, and he's considering going on for a master's in social work at the University of Texas at Austin. So we are happy to have him present.
Thank you. Thank you. As Dr. Young said, I'm Matt Basinger, and this is my presentation is on Americans' views on women in politics. It is an investigation of the General Social Survey of 2006. So I'll start off my presentation by going over just what is the General Social Survey. The General Social Survey is run by the National Opinion Research Center. It's out of the University of Chicago. And what they basically do is they go out and they do mostly a lot of face-to-face interviews. They do also some telephone interviews. But that's where my data is coming from. And in my current research I'm looking at, I have 6,023 participants. And this is a look at the different variables that I considered for this project. The first variable I decided to examine, I thought would be really good for this, is political affiliation. I narrowed it down to just liberal or conservative. In the social survey, there's a lot of different options. You could have extremely liberal, moderately liberal, so I just narrowed it down to those that just said that they're either just liberal or conservative. And I thought religious preference would be another very good variable to look at. I narrowed that down to those that are Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, other, or none. And sex is just male or females is what I examined. Race I thought was another really important variable to examine. In this I decided to examine whites, African Americans, and Hispanics. And my dependent variable is are women emotionally suited for politics. The way the question is actually worded is, do you agree or disagree with this statement that men are more emotionally suited for politics than are most women? That's the way the question is stated in that. And my main reason for wanting to do this project was I wanted to find out, do a little investigation to why women are underrepresented in politics. You know, they make up a little bit more than half of the population, but yet the representation at both the state and national levels are under 50%. And this is a look at my original hypothesis. This was before I even looked at any of the findings or anything. This is how I thought my research project would go. I thought conservatives, Protestants, Catholics, Jewish, and whites would be more likely to agree with this statement. They are more likely to agree that most men are more emotionally suited for politics than are most women. I hypothesized that those that had no religious preference, women, liberals, African Americans, and Hispanics would be more likely to disagree with the statement. That was my original hypothesis. And so before I got into all this, I did a literature review. I basically tried to find as much research as I can before I actually ran all my tables and everything to try to, so I just tried to find out what I could before I did my research. These are some statistics that I found. First one up there is that women, they make up 17% of Congress. So that's not a very high number. I did find that women tend to fare better at the state level than they do at the federal level. So the state level, they make up about 24% of state legislatures. Also, out of the 50 states that we have, 6 of those states have female governors. So that's a really low number. And then when I examined African Americans in the literature, I found that they tend to do they're a little bit more worse off than whites are. African American women make up 4% of Congress at the national level, and they're only 4.7% at the state level. So it's just a little bit better at the state level than at the national level for African American women. And these next couple of slides are some of the researches that I examined, and I've posted on these slides. I have some of the research that I found that I thought was interesting. Some of these are some more statistics. This was some research done by Paxton and Hughes in 2007. They examined examined polls, and one poll that they examined in 1937 found that 33% of Americans were willing to vote for a female candidate for president. From 1937 up into the 1990s, that increased up to 90%. 90% of people said they would be willing to vote for a woman running for president. And then they also found in the 1970s that 50% of the general public believed men were more emotionally suited for politics than women. I really like that statistic, so it really goes right into the heart of what I wanted to look at. Do people think most men are emotionally suited for politics than are most women? So in the 70s, 50% of people believe most men were more emotionally suited for politics than are most women. Also found a poll on that in 2002, where it dropped to 25% agreeing with that statement. So it seems like from that time period that people are becoming more willing to think that women are as emotionally suited for politics as are men. Another thing I found interesting from these researchers was that they found that those that said they were Democrats were more likely to say that they were willing to vote for a woman for president than were their Republican counterparts. So I thought that was a really interesting thing to find. These are some more researches that I examined. They wanted to find out from the population how much of government should be made up of men. And in their poll, they found that nearly half of the population thinks men should be made up of they should make up 50% or more of government. And then 28% say that should be somewhere between 50 and 75% should be men. And 17% in this said that men should make up more than 75%, and 7% of men said men should make up less than 50%. So I think the very first statistic is one that kind of really stood out at me, that nearly half the population think men should already make up half or more of government. So I really like that statistic, and I was really interested to see how that might influence the findings that I would see. For the religion aspect, I examined the Baylor Religion Survey. This is out of Baylor University. This is from 2007. In this particular survey, they had 1,700 participants, and they asked a question that was really direct to my research: are most men better suited emotionally for politics than are most women? And what they found was that 71% of those that were Jewish disagreed with that. 66% of those that were Catholics disagreed. 48% of evangelical Protestants disagreed, and 78% of those that said they had no religious preference disagreed. Now on to the findings. After reviewing all that, I ran a bunch of tables together from the General Social Survey, and I broke everything down. And so we'll look at each category differently. We'll look at race, and then we'll look at political affiliation, and so forth. This first chart examines the results from white, blacks, and Hispanics. You'll notice over on the left-hand side, it just says women not suited for politics. That could be a little bit misleading when you just look at that, but that's basically just going back to the original statement, do you think most men are more emotionally suited for politics than are most women? And these are the results from that. Under the disagreeing column, 76.8% of white disagreed with the statement, compared to 78.8% of blacks and 77.6% of Hispanics. And all these numbers, 1,037, 204, 125, that's just the number of people from those races that answered, that disagreed from those. And in the bottom right-hand corner, the 1,771, that's the total amount from these three groups. So pretty much from what this basically tells us is that there's really not, the differences between whites, blacks, and Hispanics are not statistically significant. They're pretty similar, 76, 78, 77. On the agreeing side, they're 23, 21, 22. So they're pretty, I didn't see that difference that I thought I would. I thought the whites would have a higher number disagreeing than compared to the other groups, but compared to my original hypothesis, it did not turn out that way. This next table examines the liberals and conservatives. Just as I thought in my hypothesis, liberals were more likely to disagree with the statement than conservatives. 86.6% of liberals disagreed with the statement compared to 70% of conservatives, which is exactly how I thought it would go in my hypothesis. This one this really stood out at me. This is comparing all the different religious preferences. 73.7% of Protestants disagreed that most men are more emotionally suited for politics than are most women. compared to 79% of Catholics, 70% of Jewish, 83% of none, and 83.5% that said they have another religion. I thought the number would be higher for Protestants, Catholics, and Jewish. I thought their number for agreeing with that would be higher. One thing that initially stood out at me with this was the number of Jewish people that were in this survey. There was 34 of them in the survey, and at first I kind of wondered, why is that number so low? Well, actually, based on the proportion with the other groups, Jewish people make up about 1% of the population. So one thing I thought might be interesting in a future study would be to see if I had more Jewish people in this study, would those statistics hold the same? So instead of doing a random sample that was done in this, maybe some sort of stratified sample could be done on Jewish people and seeing if these numbers would hold up. This table is the respondents of males and females. 75.6% of males disagreed with the statement compared to 78.4% of females. So it does go in line with what I thought. I thought more females would be more likely to disagree with the statement than males. However, only 78.4% of women disagreed that most men are more emotionally suited for politics than are most women. I would have thought that number should have been at least in the 90%, instead of just 78% of women disagreeing. So I thought that was really interesting and something that really stood out at me, that number wasn't higher for women. So do these findings matter? I think they could play a role in future elections. Seeing how people, based on the statistics, seeing how people think about women in politics, maybe women might be able to feel more confident that their political participation can increase, especially since it seems like based from the 1930s up towards present, most people seem to think that women are as emotionally suited for politics as are men. And also due to the fact that that a lot of liberals were, in one of the surveys said that they would be really likely to vote for a female candidate. Might this have an impact on the Democratic Party? They might be able to run more women, since Democrats, according to Paxton and Hughes, are more likely to vote for a woman than compared to Republicans. So Democrats might be able to run more women in the future to increase women's political participation. Then also from this, just examining these statistics, maybe we could try to come up with some solutions to try to increase women's political participation. There's some countries out there that use a quota system. Use a quota system to try to increase women's political participation. So, from these statistics, maybe some sort of solutions can be drawn up to try to increase women's political participation. And at the end of this, I thought of ways to try to improve this study for future examination. One thing I thought that might be good is having a larger sample of Hispanics and African Americans. Whites were pretty much predominant in my sample, so getting a larger view of Hispanics and African Americans I think might be important since they're a growing segment of our population. Also, one group I did exclude was Asians. I didn't examine them, but they're also a growing group in this country, and I think for a future project they'd be important to examine and see how their views compare to the other races and ethnicities. The influence of the Tea Party. The Tea Party is a recent phenomenon, and one thing I thought might be interesting in a future study is to see how the views of the Tea Party compare to that of other conservatives, maybe more moderate or other types of conservatives, and see how they hold up against each other. Because of course the Tea Party, they had Michelle Bachmann was running for president. She didn't stay in the race very long, but she did. She was part of the Republican primaries, and also I think future studies. My study just relied on past research and the general social survey. So any type of future study that's done on these, I think should not just rely on just GSS data. And also all my data is very quantitative. I just looked at numbers and statistics. Qualitative data I think would be really good to examine as well. Try to figure out, why do people feel the way they do? Why do they feel men are more mostly suited for politics than are women? Or why do they not feel that way? I think that kind of qualitative data can be very useful in determining why people feel the way that they feel. And then also maybe having an increase in mail and phone surveys, maybe trying to just increasing those and trying to see, maybe testing different segments of the population, see how they compare. Like one thing might be interesting is to even have that done in Alamosa, have maybe some sort of mail survey or phone survey and see how they compare to the national statistics. So see how it's broken down by region. And that's the end of it. Is there any questions? Yeah.
You talked about the qualitative data. I mean, when you're doing your research, is there anything out there that leads to what you think reasons why people view it that way?
It's a good question. I think, well, especially with conservatives and liberals, one reason why people might feel the way they do, if you're conservative, your main issue is you want to conserve the way things are. And the way things have been is that women have not been as, the representation's been lower, so I think they want to maybe try to conserve the way things are. And liberals, I think they're more likely to think that in a more progressive type of attitude and try to increase women's representation. Matt.
Why do you think that there is a high proportion of women in state governments rather than the federal government?
I think at the federal government, it's you just need a lot of money to run. Well, in any election, you need a lot of money to run. I think maybe you might need the amount of money that you need to run in a federal election. Women in the past have been economically disadvantaged compared to men, so maybe they don't have the money to be able to compete at the national level. So I think that might be a reason why they do better at the state level than they do at the national level.
I'm wondering why in your hypothesis you thought that, if I get this right, maybe, that whites would be more likely to agree with the statement than Latinos.
My main reason behind that is I was thinking a lot of, I thought white people would be more likely to affiliate with conservatives, with the Republican Party, and I thought since they're not they wouldn't be as liberal in their views, so I thought they'd be more likely to think that men are more mostly suited for politics than are women. Yeah.
On your slide 6, I noticed that there was a fluctuation with the years on the percentages of people that agreed and didn't disagree. Disagreed? Sorry.
6.
Right, one more, right there. No, go back. One more. 6, right
This
there.
one?
Okay, now it says like on 1937, it was 33%.
Mm-hmm.
In the 90s, it went up to 90%, but then it dropped in the 70s. And I'm unclear, is that in 2002, it was like at an all-time low of 25%? Or am I reading this right?
Well, it did, yeah, that's one thing I did mention. It did increase during the 90s, and then for a bit it did have a little bit of a dip.
What do you think the reason for it, America's fluctuation in their agreement and disagreement would be? Would it be the economy or just how many women are in politics?
I think it could be a mixture of the economy and how many women are in politics. That's a really good question. I'm really not sure why there was such a huge discrepancy. I don't know, maybe it's just from, they did examine different polls, so I don't know if it's just maybe one poll of the population had 90% and a different poll, 25%. I think it would just be a difference in polls.
I find it just curious that in 37, it was 33, and in 2002, we went, it seemed like back into the dark ages or something. How does that happen?
No, two different questions.
Yeah.
Well, that one was, well, the top one was whether they would be willing to vote for a female candidate. In 2002, it's whether they're emotionally suitable or not.
Oh, okay.
So there are two different questions that are examined.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh.
I think it's slide 9, actually. Since we're both here. Yeah, no, wait, that one, sorry,
This
that
one?
one. The Dolan in the name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, one slide up. So, whatever, yeah,
Oop.
that one.
Mhm.
They're looking at, was this broken down, because you did a slide, in any of your research, you saw slides that were men versus women and what they thought. And then you also talked about different racial groups and what they thought. Did anybody break it down, like black men versus black women and what they thought, and white women versus white men and what they thought? Does that make sense?
Oh,
Like, were white men more likely to think that they were more suitable to be leaders than white women thought? You know what I'm asking?
in the religion survey?
Huh?
Or in this?
In the
this-
emotional sort, just in general, did anybody break it down by sex and race? So, what black men thought versus what black women thought, not just what black people thought and what men thought.
I don't believe so. Pretty much it just, the articles I looked at, they focused on one or the other.
Okay.
So then I kind of just combined them. Oh, yeah.
I had a question about the religion and the potential role that it plays in its outcomes. It seems to explain a lot of the conservative numbers. What do you think is different about the evangelicals? Where is there something different? As we see more and more people move towards affiliation with the evangelical church, both in the U.S. and other countries, is there something different about that church and their viewpoints? Are they more or less conservative? And do you think in the future that would influence these type of positions?
I think so. It was in the 1980s, evangelicals pretty much had a whole realignment to the Republican Party. So they hold a lot of extremely conservative views, and I think that's influenced their current views on women, on whether they think a women's place should be just in a home or if they should be just subordinate to men. I think those type of views influence whether their viewpoints on whether women should be participating in politics or not. Okay.
Just real fast, within the religious breakdown, and since it's coming up in the current election, is the Mormon church represented in any of these groups? Would they be in the other, among your group? I think you had another category, didn't you? So would they be in the other? Because the stereotype of the Mormon church is it tends to be more conservative in the role of women.
Mhm.
So I was just curious about what that particular group, the Jewish faith, the Catholic faith, they were pulled out.
I think they could fall under other. I didn't really look at them specifically, but based on their political views, they do tend to be more conservative. So I would predict that they would fall maybe more in line with the evangelical Protestants with their views. That's what I would